Discover the amazing truth, how one billionaire's surprising kiss transformed his life forever. Jack Morrison stared out through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, the skyline of Manhattan shimmering like a mirage of success. Yet, beneath his tailored suit, his spirit felt like a lead weight pulling him down. For years he had conquered the corporate world, a titan of industry, but now, at 42, he felt more disconnected from his heart than ever. The cold reality of his bank account clashed brutally with the warmth of the Midwestern values he'd been raised on. The friendly handshakes that once meant everything had faded into the background noise of ruthless negotiations and cutthroat mergers. He hadn't spoken to his sister in years. Their relationship had been a casualty of ambition, collateral damage of a war he didn't realize he was fighting. Deciding to escape the hollow luxury of his high-rise, Jack found himself driving through the winding roads of his hometown. The tree-lined streets, now alive with vibrant autumn leaves, tugged at his memory. He passed the familiar old bookstore, its window filled with art books and poetry he'd once obsessed over. Compelled by nostalgia, Jack entered, hoping to reconnect with the simpler pleasures that had once brought him joy. As he wandered through the aisles, he unexpectedly collided with Emma. The high school art teacher stood before him, her presence radiating a fierce passion that made Jack's pulse quicken. They exchanged words, initially hesitant, but the conversation quickly thrived. Emma challenged him, asking direct questions about the choices he'd made that led to his isolated life. Her words struck a chord deep within him. He felt a mix of admiration and fear as he faced his choices. The tension was palpable, an invisible thread connecting them, and as their conversation reached its peak, he kissed her. It felt electric, like a part of him that had been dormant suddenly awakened. But guilt washed over him afterward, swiftly replacing the high of the kiss. He thought of his estranged family, of the rift caused by corporate decisions and moral compromises that made his skin crawl. His heart raced as the joy of the moment clashed with the cold reality of his corporate world. Their discussion had illuminated his hypocrisy. Emma's passion for art and education starkly contrasted the damage his corporate decisions had wrought. The truth hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Before he could process this whirlwind of emotions, a moment of clarity struck him, as if the universe was delivering an ultimatum. Emma's art program was threatened by budget cuts, a direct consequence of the corporate policies he had championed. A rush of determination surged through him. He could be the one to save it, to right a systemic wrong that echoed in his own life. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. But each step he contemplated towards change felt more challenging than the last. The clock was ticking, and his corporate peers were not going to accept someone turning against their tightly knit circle of profit-driven elite. He felt the oppressive weight of their disapproval and his own fear of losing everything he'd worked for, a double-edged sword that could cut through his ambitions and the life he built. Just as Jack prepared to take a stand, the phone rang, and the voice on the other end pulled him back into another inconvenient reality. It was his lawyer, revealing shocking information about his family's legacy, gnawing at the morals he had abandoned. Jack's heart sank. Would he remain shackled to a hollow empire he had constructed? Or could he face the truth? The choice hung heavily, and he could either let the corporate machine grind on or ignite a rebellion that threatened his entire existence. Jack sat at his desk, the city sprawling beneath him like a lifeless giant. The lawyer's voice still echoed in his mind, laden with revelations that he fought to understand. His family's legacy, once a source of pride, had become entangled in the very greed he now sought to escape. He should have felt anger or betrayal, but instead, a deep dread settled inside him, a sense that the walls of his carefully constructed empire were closing in. He realized he had spent most of his adult life prioritizing profits over purpose, power over people. The intoxicating allure of high-stakes deals had masked the erosion of his core values. Guilt twisted in his gut, echoing the very sentiments Emma had instilled during their dialogue. She had exposed a portion of his soul he had kept buried, mislabeling it as ambition. He questioned whether his accolades were achievements or merely hollow gestures devoid of meaning. As he stared into the skyline, Jack felt an unfamiliar pressure, one not commonly associated with boardrooms or business strategies. This pressure was rooted in something sincere, a desire to reconcile with the man he had lost to capitalism's embrace. It didn't take long for a plan to form. If he was to advocate for Emma's art program, he would need to confront the very pillars of his corporate identity that had made a mockery of creativity and passion. Determined, he pulled out his laptop and began researching every aspect of the budget cuts facing Emma's school. He immersed himself in understanding educational funding and the layers of bureaucracy that affected art programs nationwide. Each keyword he typed echoed with a renewed sense of purpose. It wasn't just about saving a program. It was about rekindling hope, about advocating for a cause that truly mattered. Jack's late-night sessions became a crucible for his understanding. The more he learned, the more he recognized the daunting challenge ahead. His position as a CEO could either crush his efforts or lend unprecedented weight to them. He envisioned the scene, him standing before his board, presenting his findings, making the case that investing in the arts would yield returns far beyond immediate profitability, returns in creativity, community engagement, and even in employee satisfaction. But would they listen? Would they understand? The resentment among his peers was not lost on him. He could already hear the jeers of disbelief. The whispers about him becoming soft, losing his edge, would ring loud in the conference rooms he once commanded. Yet he couldn't ignore that tremor deep in his core, an urging from the part of him that once viewed the world through a lens of idealism. Jack needed allies, but who would support a man considered a traitor to his class? Should he reach out to Emma? The trust they established over their brief encounter felt fragile, yet real. It would take courage to share his plans with her, to expose the vulnerability that came with admitting he might have gone astray. But something about the thought of her eyes lighting up at the possibility invigorated him. He decided he would set a meeting. He would share not just how he could help save her art program, but how he intended to redefine his legacy. As he arranged a time to meet Emma, a thrill ignited within him, shaking off the weight of his past decisions. What if the steps he was about to take would form a connection not just with her, but with his own lost self? Just as hope began to blossom, his phone buzzed with another notification. It was a message from his lawyer, a reminder about a critical meeting scheduled for the following day that could change everything regarding his family's business. He hesitated, torn between two worlds, two paths: continue the legacy of cold indifference, or forge a new way forward connected to empathy and passion. With the meeting drawing near, Jack knew the time had come to face the contradictions of his life head-on. Would he arm himself with the truth and risk it all for the sake of something meaningful, or would he cling to the status quo? The future loomed ominously ahead, filled with decisions that would test his resolve, courage, and integrity in ways he could scarcely imagine. But his heart urged him onward as he prepared to confront the ultimate battle, redefining the billionaire he had become into someone who was, at last, true to himself. Jack paced the plush carpeting of his office, the weight of his imminent meeting anchoring him in place. Each corner of the room, the polished mahogany desk, the imposing skyline framed by floor-to-ceiling windows, reminded him of his carefully curated life. Yet, within him lay a restless storm, a conflict between the man he had been and who he aspired to become. He had to make a choice, and the ticking clock echoed the urgency of his decisions. He leaned against the glass, squinting as he observed the city that had always been a backdrop to his success. For years, each skyscraper had symbolized his achievements, but now, the same structures bore witness to his moral decline. He closed his eyes, allowing fleeting memories to wash over him, laughter and joy in art galleries, children delighting in creativity, a world vibrant with imagination. The realization struck him anew. This was the essence he had traded for deals finalized with cold precision. Memories of Emma flickered through his mind, her passion and conviction palpable even in his recollection. It was her art program that ignited the fire inside him, an opportunity both to heal his legacy and reconnect with a purpose he had abandoned. The thought of their next meeting propelled him forward, but fear clawed at the edges of this newfound clarity. What if he failed? What if his peers dismissed his vision? Would he become nothing more than a laughingstock, a caricature of a man trying desperately to escape a gilded cage? There would be no clear path, he recognized, but the decision to engage with Emma felt like the first step into the unknown. He began considering ways to solidify a case that could resonate with his board. Rather than just statistics, he pondered weaving personal narratives into his presentation, stories of young artists whose lives had been transformed by creative outlets, the intrinsic value of art that could invigorate a corporate landscape starved for inspiration. Could he bridge the gap between profit and purpose? As the sun dipped lower in the sky, he transitioned from dread to determination. He envisioned standing in front of his board, possibly facing their incredulous expressions. The thought sparked something deep within him, a fierce resistance against anything that threatened to undermine the journey he was willing to undertake. He would lay his vulnerabilities bare, articulating the necessity of investing in humanity before profit. That evening he called Emma. Each ring felt like a countdown to uncertain possibilities, until finally she answered. Her voice was cautious yet hopeful, laced with an echo of their previous conversations. Jack felt a burst of inexplicable energy surge through him. "Emma, I want to help your program," he declared, the words tumbling from his mouth before he could second-guess himself. "I'm ready to fight for it." He could almost hear her inkling realization that they could genuinely present a united front. Finding allies wouldn't just reinforce his mission, it would solidify his own sense of identity. But lurking uncertainties remained. Was he ready to confront his board? Would they understand the significance of this change? The stakes intensified with every passing moment. The intangible commitment of evolving from the man they knew to this new version of himself felt almost unreal. The following morning, as Jack dressed, he caught a glimpse of himself in the mirror. The reflection harbored just enough resolve to push him through the upcoming confrontation. Today was pivotal. Today could redefine not just his career, but also the path of his personal redemption. As he entered the boardroom, nerves coiled within him, yet he straightened his shoulders. Perhaps they would mock his ambition, but he would refuse to be deterred. The air thickened with expectancy. Just as Jack prepared to speak, another message chimed on his phone. It was from his lawyer, a glimpse of impending legal troubles looming ominously over him once more, threatening to derail his mission. Could he navigate these choppy waters, turning adversity into an opportunity for growth? As he took a deep breath, the moment of truth awaited, and external pressures faded into the background. What matters now was the journey ahead, and Jack was prepared to confront whatever challenge came his way. In that room filled with ambitious executives, Jack began his presentation, seeking to ignite not just a discussion, but a revolution within himself. This was only the beginning. His fight had only just begun, and everything hung in the balance. As Jack stood at the front of the boardroom, the myriad faces of skeptical executives pinched in concentration, he felt the weight of expectation loom over him. He'd rehearsed this presentation countless times, but the immediacy of the moment transformed his well-crafted notes into a blur of anxiety-heavy thoughts. Deep down, he questioned the sincerity of his own conviction. Was this just another game, a performance designed to save face, or had he truly begun to pivot toward authenticity? "Thank you for gathering here today," he began, his voice steadier than he anticipated. He scanned the room, searching for signs of engagement, and found a mix of interest and disbelief. "I want to talk about a vision for our company that goes beyond quarterly profits, one that could redefine the very essence of our brand." As he wove personal anecdotes into his narrative, he could feel his heart quickening. He narrated stories of young artists whose lives were forever changed by creative opportunities. Each story he shared painted a picture of passion, resilience, and ultimately, connection. With every word, Jack began to shed the polished exterior that years of corporate success had draped over him. But doubt shadowed him, lurking in the corners of his mind. What if they saw through the facade? Would they deem him an ideologue? A dreamer lost in the tides of corporate pragmatism? A hand shot up unexpectedly, cutting through his momentum. Robert, the CFO, known for his razor-sharp criticism, wore a skeptical expression. "Do you honestly believe this is a sound investment?" he challenged, his tone laced with skepticism. The question struck like a blow, each syllable echoing Jack's own fears. Was he fighting a fight worth winning, or merely indulging his own nostalgia? "What I believe," Jack replied, hesitation threading through his voice, "is that art is not just decoration. It's a channel for transformation. We've neglected the human element in our pursuit of business efficiency." He paused, gathering his thoughts, searching for the kernel of conviction that was still alive within him. People want to connect, not only with each other, but with what they create. Our engagement in the arts could foster a more imaginative workforce, leading to innovations that can drive profits. The silence in the room seemed deafening, heavy with collective doubt. Jack's eyes darted from face to face, attempting to gauge interest while battling the disquieting thought that he was mere seconds away from defeat. Unexpectedly, Emma's smiling face appeared in his mind's eye, and with it, a sense of clarity washed over him. Beneath the magnitude of the boardroom and the lenses of corporate scorn existed a more profound truth. His value as a leader wasn't found solely in financial charts, but also in how he inspired change. Think about the impact this could have. Jack pressed on, emboldened. Striving for creativity can fuel productivity. By investing in the arts, we're not just generating goodwill, we're nurturing the very essence of what will empower us to be agile in the face of change. Imagine the impact we could have, both on our bottom line and on the lives we could touch. Judging by the cautious expression softening around the room, he realized he had struck a chord. Yet as he neared the climax of his presentation, the weight of his impending legal troubles resurfaced, jarring his focus. The conversation he'd had with his lawyer before joining the boardroom flickered through his mind. The potential consequences lingered like a storm cloud, capable of darkening the bright future he envisioned. Jack, his mind echoed, mocking him against his resolve. What if your past were to claw its way back, ruining everything you're trying to salvage? A sharp breath hitched in his throat, pushing against the momentum he'd carefully built. Time slowed as he anticipated their next reactions. Would they dismiss his vision outright? Or could they see, perhaps for the first time, the man he was trying to become beneath the layers of ambition and corporate ambition? As the board began to murmur in response, Jack felt the stirrings of hope tangled with fear. What if this was the moment where he truly began to define himself, not just in the eyes of his colleagues, but within the labyrinth of his own identity? Jack sensed that the answer would reveal itself soon enough. Outside, thunder rumbled ominously, echoing his internal storm, a symbol of the turbulent journey ahead. Change was awaiting him, but could he summon the courage to embrace it and face the very truths he had long evaded? And as anticipation crackled in the air, another message from his lawyer buzzed on his phone, pulling him momentarily from the present. The clock was still ticking, and the moment of choice hung in the balance, drawing nearer with every heartbeat. The time had come to face not only the board, but the past he had tried to leave behind. Would he falter, or could he rise to meet this pivotal moment head-on? Jack held his breath as the murmurs grew louder in the boardroom. He could feel tension in the air, thicker than before, swirling around him like a storm, eager to break. From a distance, the flat tone of Robert's skepticism echoed in his mind, but the unease as the energy shifted was palpable. Something had changed. With gathering momentum, Jack made his next move. I understand concerns about investment, but we have a chance to redefine our legacy. We can cultivate a culture where creativity thrives while steering our financial ship toward calm waters. As he spoke, Jack realized that the true essence of what he was advocating for wasn't just art. It was humanity. He was awakening buried aspirations in himself and potentially in his colleagues. He had been programmed to chase profits, but this vision had carved a new path, urging him to strive for something deeper. He invoked the images of artists and innovators who had dared to imagine. Steve Jobs once said, "Creativity is just connecting things." Think of how we can connect our business goals with the passions that drive us and our customers. Imagine art that speaks to a larger audience, positioning our brand as one that champions creativity. For a moment he caught sight of Emma in his mind again, her laugh lighting up the room, and in that split second, he understood that the stakes were higher than mere profits. They were about sharing stories, both personal and professional, that transcended white-collar barriers. Yet a part of him warred with apprehension. Each detail of his past, each decision that had jeopardized his trajectory, loomed like shadows he could not shake off. What if they rejected this bold venture as yet another ploy, a last-ditch effort clinging to an ideal that history had snuffed out? Robert's voice broke through his spiraling thoughts, sharper than ever. Creativity is great, Jack, but it doesn't pay the bills. Can you guarantee the metrics that will ensure our stakeholders remain satisfied? The question hit hard, replete with challenge. This wasn't just an emotional pitch. It was a high-stakes game, where the numbers must ultimately validate any dream. In the fleeting seconds, Jack could have recoiled, reduced himself to analytics and pure logic, but he resisted, daring to forge ahead. "Metrics can guide us," he responded, adrenaline fueling him. "But let's not forget that behind each number, there are people, stories, and emotions. Our clients are not just figures on a ledger. They are artists in their own right, wanting to connect through our brand. When we invest in creativity, we invest in a movement that can disrupt our industry." As he concluded, Jack felt the charge of his convictions resonate within him. He could sense the executives leaning closer, intrigued by the dismissal of rigid adherence to the status quo. A flicker of realization crossed their faces. Here was a man challenging them to reimagine, even as shadows of doubt still flickered in their eyes. But the heaviness of his impending legal troubles lingered, overshadowing triumph even in the midst of potential acceptance. A message buzzed again on his phone, a cold reminder of the specter he tried to ignore. "What if I'm still unworthy of this transformation?" whispered his inner critic. In that moment, the fuse was lit. Would the past remain an albatross around his neck, or could he transform it into a propellant for growth? Jack cast one last look at the boardroom, now alive with unspoken questions and potential answers. The clock continued to tick in rhythm with his pounding heart, each thud resonating with possibility. He had reached a crossroads. Either he succumbed to fear or embraced a future laden with uncertainty but ripe with potential. As he took a firm step forward, the horizon ahead blurred with ambiguity, and he braced himself, mindful that change, however daunting, was an invitation to rediscover not just his professional identity, but himself. As the murmuring subsided and the attention directed undeniably toward him again, Jack knew he was on the brink of something significant. Would he seize this moment to redefine not just their company but his own essence? Would the past rise against him or yield to the emerging version of himself, one fueled by vulnerability and potential? As he awaited their response, he realized that he wasn't just battling for the company's future, but for his own redemption. And in the back of his mind, he couldn't shake the question, what would the price of honesty be? The boardroom fell silent as Jack's words lingered in the air, heavy with potential and anxiety. Every eye was locked on him. He felt their skepticism mixed with a flicker of curiosity. It was a moment suspended in time, where the weight of decisions and possibilities bore down on him. Taking a breath, he steadied his resolve, almost sensing the urge to leap despite the daunting abyss of doubt yawning beneath him. Jack glanced at Robert, who remained unmoved, arms crossed in defiance. Was it fear or simply resistance to change? The question rattled in his mind, refusing to settle. He would need to reach him, to dismantle that wall brick by brick. "Look, Robert," Jack began, his voice steady. "I understand your hesitation, and I respect your experience. But if we continue to do things the way we've always done them, we risk fading into irrelevance." The long-held grip on the corporate structure felt like shackles, binding them to a stagnant existence. For the first time, Jack contemplated the smothering corporate identity he had once revered. Who had he become in this endless chase for profits void of meaning? As Jack pressed on, he found the thread of his vision weaving through his words, allowing doubt to slip away. "We can shift this company from being just another player in the industry to becoming the beacon of innovation. Creativity can fuel our revenue, reflecting a dynamic and appealing vision that attracts and retains our clients." Gradually, the tension began to ease, replaced by scattered nods and curious expressions. He briefly lost himself in the moment, feeling empowered, a stark contrast to how he had felt when he'd first walked in. But the shadows of self-doubt still loomed, reminding him of the turbulent waters he had to navigate. Jack's phone buzzed again, a clear intrusion that grounded him. A message from his lawyer about the mounting legal fight echoed in the back of his mind. What if his dreams unraveled under the weight of his past? Panic surged, but he forced it down. Instead, he harnessed it, using the fire of discomfort to articulate his purpose. Creativity isn't just a strategy, it's an essential human experience. What if we foster a workplace where ideas flourish, where people feel safe to share their true selves? He continued, his voice rising with fervor. Imagine our employees, invigorated by discovery and collaboration, driving innovation forward. Those words, the call to vulnerability, seemed to resonate within the room, the executives now visibly reconsidering their positions. The skepticism began to shift, just as the dynamic in his chest felt lighter. For the first time in a long time, he felt a connection with those present. They all carried ambitions, fears, goals, human experiences that could finally converge through his vision. Yet lurking in the corners of his mind, the inevitability of his situation reared its head. Would they see him as a visionary, or merely as a man with a tarnished past? His grip tightened around the edge of the table. It was a battleground, not just for the company, but an internal contest, a test of his resilience. The boardroom door creaked open, drawing Jack's attention. Elaine, the head of HR, walked in, her expression alert and concerned. Did she sense the shift? Was she there to throw another wrench in his plans? Her mere presence sent ripples through the atmosphere, a reminder that every turn in this discussion could hold repercussions. In that moment, Jack faced an internal reckoning. Would he allow the shadows of his past betray him again? The stakes reached beyond the company. This was about redefining his version of success, carving out a space where honesty and creativity could exist. He breathed in deeply and prepared himself for the next phase of confrontation. As the murmurs resumed, Jack couldn't help but wonder if he was ready to fully embrace this momentum, if he could truly risk it all for rebirth. Ahead lay the haunting question that still needed daring. What transformation awaited him beyond this pivotal gathering? Jack's heart raced, the tension in the boardroom now mixed with a palpable anticipation. He locked eyes with Elaine, who stood at the entrance, and wondered what her presence signified. The underlying anxiety returning, he took a slow breath, determined not to show cracks in his armor. This was not just a matter of corporate strategy anymore. It felt like a life-altering moment, a confrontation not only with his past failures, but with the person he aspired to become. Elaine stepped forward, her presence commanding. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just received some alarming news regarding our latest project. It appears that our client might pull out due to a lack of progress," she stated, voice steady yet concerned. Murmurs erupted in the room, drowning in apprehension. Jack sensed the digression, a slip back into fear and uncertainty, the very landscape he was trying to navigate away from. "Elaine, let's focus on the larger picture here," Jack interjected, pushing through the tidal wave of doubt. "If we dedicate ourselves to fostering creativity and transparency, we can navigate these challenges together and turn them into opportunities. This isn't just about this one project, but about revamping our entire approach." He felt his words resonate in the room, yet Robert's scowl remained fixed like a storm cloud threatening to unleash its fury. They had known each other for years. Robert, a stalwart against change; Jack, a man on the brink of transformation. Each push and pull of their dynamic felt personal, as if every disagreement was a confrontation with Jack's own history of uncertainty. Tension was riding high. Jack could physically feel the doubt gnawing at him. Was he really the man who could lead them all? What if I fail? What if they betray my trust? Those invasive thoughts trickled through, but he stripped away their power as he leaned into his vision, his ambition for something more. "Let's turn this around," he said, now engaging the room fully. "I propose we set up a focused strategy session, bringing together teams from all departments to brainstorm solutions. We can empower our employees to take ownership of their contributions, to feel that they are a part of something greater." Elaine's eyebrows raised slightly, intrigued. "We haven't tried that in a while. Maybe it's time to rekindle those connections," she suggested cautiously. Jack's determination surged, her willingness signifying a crack in the rigid wall that had long constrained the company's progress. As the executives nodded in agreement, a fire ignited within Jack. It was more than a plan to improve company dynamics. It was a glimpse at the leader he longed to be, steps toward a personal renaissance. But the shadows of his previous failures lingered at the edge, reminding him of the risks entailed in this ambition. Could he truly steer the ship without sinking? "Jack, we're still not convinced this turnaround can work," Robert interjected sharply, cutting through the budding positivity. "We need solid metrics, not just empty ideals." His words fell like a heavy weight in the atmosphere, threatening to derail Jack's burgeoning momentum. "Metrics evolve from innovation," Jack replied, voice firm yet mindful. "Without taking a leap, to innovate and disrupt, we have nothing to measure. My vision isn't just a gamble. It's grounded in feedback from our own employees, from our experiences. It's rooted in real change." The tension hung thick again, eyes darting between Jack and Robert. This confrontation had become more than a debate over ideas. It was about proving his worth to those around him, and, perhaps more profoundly, to himself. A reckoning loomed, and Jack felt the stakes elevate from professional to intensely personal. The very essence of his journey was crystallizing in this moment. The question was no longer just whether he could present his vision, it was whether he could withstand his own fear of failure and self-doubt. A shift was happening, but would it be enough to uproot a stagnating corporate identity? As silence enveloped the room once again, Jack's resolve solidified. This time, he would embrace vulnerability as strength, stepping into his leadership role with fierce authenticity and courage. But could he forge the trust he needed among his peers in this fight for relevance? Just as Jack felt the edges of clarity forming, Elaine's phone buzzed again, breaking the tension anew. "Jack, we have emergency news from our legal team," she said, her voice betraying concern. The walls felt like they were closing in. Jack's pulse quickened as the looming sense of impending chaos threatened to derail everything he had worked to rebuild. What fresh horrors awaited him, and could they shake his burgeoning resolve? Elaine's phone vibrated, but Jack's focus sharpened on the faces around him. Their eyes flickered between unease and skepticism, and he wondered, with each heartbeat, if they could sense the fragility of his own composure. This was no longer just a boardroom discussion. It had escalated into a wrestling match of wills where his confidence hung by a thread. "Let's hear it," Jack replied, voice steadier than he felt. His life was spiraling into a mix of opportunities and crises, and he could feel the responsibility edging closer like storm clouds. This emergency news from the legal team? It could define his journey as a leader, limit his vision, or fuel the fire of change he so desperately craved. Elaine locked eyes with him, hesitating before speaking. "It's serious, Jack. There are potential violations of our contractual agreements with the client based on performance metrics. We could face significant repercussions." Jack's breath caught. Those words echoed like a siren, announcing not just an operational challenge, but a mirror reflecting his innermost fears. The specter of failure, of not being enough, settled heavily across his shoulders. How could he lead a turnaround if the foundation beneath him was crumbling? "Then let's regroup," he said, fighting through the haze of uncertainty. "We'll address the concerns head-on. We can work out a plan that reassures the client of our commitment while reinforcing our internal unity." His heart hammered as he thought of what Robert would say. Would he dismiss this crisis as another instance of Jack's naive optimism? "Jack," Robert interjected, a hint of incredulity breaking through. "This sounds like yet another idealistic response. We need concrete action, not more meetings." The piercing accusation rang through the air, a challenge that amplified Jack's internal dialogue. Could he truly be that visionary? Or was Robert right, merely spinning dreams without the power of execution? "Concrete actions come from ideas that are allowed to breathe," Jack replied, locking in on Robert's wary expression. "But if we do not cultivate innovative solutions, we'll stifle our chances of progress. Metrics are essential, yes, but they must align with a narrative that inspires our team and reassures our clients. Compliance isn't enough. We need commitment." The room weighed his words, silence settling again like a thick fog. But with it came the palpable flicker of intrigue as Elaine stepped closer. "I agree. Conflict often allows the best solutions to emerge." Jack's resolve solidified. The whispers of doubt that had once shackled him seemed to shrink in intensity. Could he begin to see himself not as a reluctant leader caught in a storm, but as the captain navigating towards clearer skies? As conversation began to shift, a flicker of possibility emerged. Jack seized it. "How about we move swiftly, align our departments to tackle this issue from all fronts? Let's designate a cross-team task force to ensure we leave no stone unturned." Just as some heads nodded and ideas began to flow, a flash of anger surged through him. Could Robert, a veteran in the industry, still doubt him? With the stakes this high, Jack faced a choice. Would he bend to the patriarchal views that had dominated this space for too long, or would he challenge them? As Jack steered the discussion toward actionable strategies, a revelation struck. He didn't have to fit into the mold of an established leader. His authenticity could be the catalyst they needed, the spark that ignited true innovation and collaboration. "Let's use this crisis to strengthen our team," he urged, realizing that his voice took on a fervent tone. "Let's rebuild trust, redefine roles, and hold each other accountable for not just metrics, but for the culture we want to foster." But the question pulsed at the back of his mind. Could vulnerability truly breed strength in this environment? The quest to conquer doubt led Jack to a precipice, and the only way forward appeared lined with intricate pathways of trust and collaboration. As Elaine's phone buzzed again, disturbing the fragile calm once more, Jack's heart raced anew. What could possibly follow this storm? Was another round of bad news about to strike? Or could Jack channel the momentum and emerge more resilient than before? He braced himself, eager to find out what they would face next. Would it be the opportunity to shape the company's narrative, or the obstacle that would force him to reckon with his limits? Jack's thoughts raced, darting between the palpable tension of the room and the impending sense of doom that Elaine's phone buzzing brought. The board members shifted in their seats, anticipation thickening the air. Each fleeting moment felt like a countdown, propelling Jack further into the depths of his inner turmoil. A soft yet authoritative tone broke the tension. "We should address the issue collectively. Each department brings a unique perspective that could lead us to a well-rounded solution," Elaine suggested, her voice steady like a lighthouse in stormy seas. Jack nodded, bolstered by her words but acutely aware of the skepticism that still shadowed Robert's features. "Agreed. But let's not just bring ideas to the table. We need to take action," he asserted, directing his gaze at each member, hoping to spark a sense of urgency. "Action?" Robert challenged, eyebrows raised. Ideas without a strategy are just wishful thinking. We need a roadmap, something definitive. Jack felt a ripple of anger and frustration. This was not the moment to shackle the room with negativity. How about this? For every idea we discuss, let's also draft a preliminary action plan. It's not just about what we think should be done, but how we can actually do it, he proposed, his voice gaining resolution. As murmurs of agreement began to bubble up, a flicker of self-doubt momentarily clouded Jack's mind. Could he really lead them into uncharted waters? The whispering fear echoed as he thought of every mistake and setback that loomed in his past. Yet, he tempered that fear with a growing sense of responsibility. The path ahead required more than tactical prowess. It needed vision and authenticity, to show them he wasn't just leading, but walking beside them. Ideas flowed like water, and Jack found a newfound rhythm to their dialogue. Each suggestion illuminated the potential for success, slowly chipping away at the uncertainty that had clung to him. He could see the transformation happening, as hesitation surrendered to determination, and skepticism morphed to cautious optimism. The discussion rolled on, with Jack at the helm, and his focus sharpened. Strategies turned from the abstract to tangible objectives. They talked about timelines, reallocating resources, and designing metrics that would bolster their performance while embracing a culture of accountability. Each conversation stroke felt like the first step off a precipice. He was no longer just trying to hold the ground, but was moving forward. And yet, beneath the surface of this newfound clarity, a residual tension bubbled. A confrontation loomed over the horizon as Robert interrupted Jack again, this time with pointed words. You may want collaboration, Jack, but don't forget, this is a business, not a team-building exercise. You can't please everyone. The challenge in Robert's voice felt almost personal, exposing Jack's vulnerabilities like open wounds. For a moment he faltered, grappling with the dichotomy of his desires, to unify the team and to assert his authority. What would it mean if he could not persuade Robert to come alongside him? The thought pierced his resolve, igniting an urgency. I'm not trying to please everyone, Jack retorted, embodying newfound confidence. I'm trying to create an environment where everyone feels empowered to contribute. The storm we're facing is too big for any of us to shoulder alone. Leadership is not about dictating. It's about inspiring genuine collaboration. An uncomfortable silence followed as Robert evaluated him from across the table. Jack's heart raced faster, urging him to maintain eye contact, refusing to back down. This was not merely a professional challenge, but a moment that could reshape how he viewed himself as a leader. What if you're wrong? Robert argued, testing him, pushing boundaries. What if I'm not? Jack shot back, frustration mingling with determination. The once looming crisis now rested firmly at the center of a budding dialogue, marked not only by clear paths forward, but by a fierce commitment to authenticity over compliance. But deep within, Jack knew the battle was far from over. Robert was not the only skeptic. Would he and others rally behind the vision he was forging? Or would they resist, forcing him to fight for his place in this arena? As thoughts churned, the tension peaked once again within the group, leaving Jack in a whirlwind of uncertainty, yet cloaked in newfound determination. What lay ahead was becoming clearer. A test of his will not just to lead, but to dismantle the established hierarchy in favor of collective power. And as Elaine's phone buzzed for a final time, a steely resolve crystallized. Jack was prepared to confront the challenge head-on, but what awaited him next? He needed to prepare, not just for the fallout of this meeting, but for a possible collision of ideals, pushing him to choose between self-doubt and unwavering commitment. Would it be the defining moment that cemented his growth, or would he buckle under pressure? Jack took a deep breath, channeling the energy of the boardroom into a palpable resolve. This wasn't just about the business anymore. It was about who he was and who he aspired to be. A leader capable of inspiration, collaboration, and something greater than profits. He realized that the battle wasn't simply against Robert. It was within himself, a struggle to redefine his legacy in a world that prized wealth over wisdom. As Elaine's phone buzzed one final time, another layer of urgency descended into the atmosphere. Jack's pulse quickened, but rather than retreating into apprehension, a wave of determination crashed over him. He had decided, no more hiding behind corporate jargon or manipulative strategies. Let's acknowledge something important here, he declared, shifting his gaze around the room. Every single one of us has a choice. We can cling to compliance, or we can challenge ourselves to be part of a transformative narrative. There was a moment of stillness, the previous conflict dissolving slightly under the weight of his conviction. Jack continued, melding remembrance of Emma into his words, the spark that reignited his path. When I visited my hometown, I realized that being a business leader isn't just about numbers, it's about building something lasting and meaningful. I witnessed how art elevated my childhood community, and I need us to do the same. The executives shifted in their seats, a collective curiosity blooming in the tense air. Robert's brow remained furrowed, but Jack felt the energy electric. An opening. Perhaps they sensed the sincerity. Perhaps they longed for change themselves. By approaching every challenge with a creative lens, we will solve problems with innovation, not outdated patterns of thinking. Each word resonated like a heartbeat, echoing in the charged atmosphere. But we can only do this together. I need each of you to step out of your comfort zones, to transcend the past biases, and create a culture that celebrates collaboration. As the murmurs began to stir again, Jack pressed on, not pausing to question their responses. Are we willing to redefine what success looks like for our company? Financials will follow if we cultivate an environment where individuals are empowered to contribute and be heard. Jack left silence in his wake, and he could see the internal gears turning in the minds of his colleagues, mirrored by the shifting expressions on their faces. Could they see the potential in what he was proposing? Or were they too far entrenched in skepticism? Then Robert spoke up once more, his expression softening ever so slightly. It's a noble aspiration, Jack, but we need a clear strategy to get there. We need data that shows how this transformation aligns with our financial goals. Jack seized this opening like a lifeline. Then let's develop those metrics together. I propose to form a task force that looks into creative solutions and tracks the influence of our initiatives on our relationship with clients and our profit margins. The conversation began to flow in a new direction, one that felt charged with earnestness and growth. They navigated through ideas, collected suggestions, and began sketching a roadmap that encompassed both emotional connection and corporate viability. Over the next hour, Jack sensed a shift. The atmosphere felt lighter, as though the room itself had relaxed. His colleagues, once rigid with doubt, now shared insights, merging their thoughts into a cohesive strategy that reignited hope within the group. In this collaborative energy, Jack discovered a sense of agency he hadn't felt in years. Each idea exchanged chip away at his insecurities, gradually replacing them with recognition that he was becoming the leader he wanted to be. Finally, as the meeting drew to a close, Jack realized that this moment marked not merely a professional milestone, but a deeply personal victory. He had confronted the fears that had shackled him, commanded their attention, and compelled them to envision a brighter future together. As they finalized plans for the task force, Jack smiled, knowing that he had ultimately taken a stand, not just for his company, but for himself. For the first time in a long while, he felt grounded, rooted in authenticity, and ready to embrace the complexities of leadership. Walking out of the boardroom, Jack felt the burden of past choices starting to lift. He now knew that challenges, be they corporate or personal, were opportunities for growth that shaped character beyond titles and bank accounts. His journey of redemption was just beginning, solidified by newfound confidence and purpose. As he headed to the door, a message from his lawyer pinged again, yet this time, it felt like a passing whisper. The impending legal battles would come, but they no longer defined him. He could handle the fallout. He would emerge stronger, not just as Jack the billionaire, but as Jack the leader, husband, son, and friend. It was time to reconnect with his estranged sister and resonate with the values he had lost. More importantly, he was resolved to support Emma's art program, ready to make decisions that would prove the power of creativity. The first step toward honoring his legacy awaited him. He was ready. Now it's your turn. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you won't miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. It really helps. Comment below your reactions and theories about this breathtaking conclusion. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this inspiring transformation. You need to show your support for personal overcoming stories. Let's make this community thrive.